recording. A couple of issues we have. I have two characters I'm working with. I'm working with Ready Player Me, and I'm working with Make Human. So Ready Player Me, the issue is that they're in an A pose by beginning, and even if you sometimes put in a T pose, if you hit roast pose, they still go back into here. So which causes problems. So I'm going to show you really quickly. I'm going to bring in my. So previously in the last week, I was trying to export from Unreal. I'm just using the assets I got from Mixamo that have a T pose. I'm going to bring in the FBX of my character. I put it in my imports folder so I can find it. And my Ready Player Me character is Bob. I don't care about all this stuff. I don't care about my mesh at all. My mesh has already been imported in my scene. I don't care about custom normals. I don't care about images. Right? Like if you want to look at settings, you can make it easier on yourself. Say I don't really care about animations. Right? I just maybe unless that animation is the T pose, maybe I'll keep it on for a second. And then the one thing is that Blender shows bones in weird ways. I want to say automatically align the bones, and that way everything doesn't look weird and wonky, and we have our character, right? So our character's in a T pose, and that's good. If I go over to my pose settings, I like looking at my bones in front, so I can see them, and then I can see my rest position is an A pose, right? So it's actually a really complicated thing to get it to be a T pose. You have to actually take the mesh off the bones, make it a T pose, make that your rest pose, and then put the mesh back on, and the mesh never bonds the same way. We don't have to worry about that because we already have our mesh inside the game engine. All we need is this character as a T pose, right? So this is my little hack. Save some time. Is I don't care about my meshes. I just need to keep track of where my assets are, right? So if we go back to our armature and go to rest pose. See, we want the current pose position to be the rest pose because that's how it retargets on the rest pose. So I'm going to say pose position, and then up here, instead of object mode, I want to get into poses, right? So this is a different mode. All right, that's a little gotcha there. You might miss that. Come back to the pose mode, and then I have options for poses. And if I come down to apply pose as rest pose. You can't do that when the mesh is on there because the mesh has a history on it or whatever. I don't know. Pose is rest pose, and now the rest of this makes sense. We've already kind of done it from last week. I won't be that short. I'll go ahead and do it, but that's the big secret is that you no longer have the A pose, right? So if I bring in my BVH data, because again, the BVH is better for the Rococo plugin. I go to my downloads. I find Tina Take. I can worry about scale. I'm not going to worry about scale. I'm just going to say import it. Ah, and it does this to you. That's right. I don't know why this is a Rococo issue. Just load in your BVH first and then bring in. Uh, I'm glad I made that mistake so that you guys get to see it. So all my settings from previous are in there. Again, if I go back to rest pose, it's an A. So mocap's already been loaded in. And then I'm going to go to pose position, pose, and apply transform as rest pose. There we go. Cool. And then my mocap data is like crazy big. Don't care. But when I select it, the important thing is that I go back to object mode, is that the rest pose is a T pose. Hopefully that doesn't look like T pose to me. Let us make sure. Do, 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 do. One more second. So let's bring in the BVH first. Always something. Downloads, BVH. Don't really care. Just get it in there. Cool. It has its own rest pose. That's T. Great. And then bring in my Ready Player Me. FPX. Or I could do this and see what happens. I'm curious. If I bring in my Ready Player Me FPX, get rid of all the other kind of stuff. So it's down here. And then let's bring in the BVH this way. Cool. Interesting. It made the rest pose a T pose. This is the wonders of Blender. I have no idea about this kind of stuff. So by bringing in the FBX take, it automatically made the rest pose of. Oh no, I'm selecting the wrong thing. Excuse me. Rest pose. There we go. Cool. So I want to make sure that my rest pose is this way. And then if I select my Tina, I have pose and rest pose. Let's put it in pose. Here we go. Let's put this one in pose. Current pose is what it's called. Great. Delete. And now we could say again, by selecting it, I want that to be rest pose. Cool, rest pose. Cool. And then let's go to the retargeting really quick. I already have it installed. Bring it over. Don't need the Studio Live. Retargeting. Tina is the source. Armature is the target. Build the bone list. Everything should match. Check over those arms. Looks good. I need to make sure auto scale. That's a big thing because the other one's really huge, right? So auto scale it and then retarget animation. And then we have we have the parent and the baby doing the same thing. Cool. We do not need Tina anymore. Delete. We don't need the plugin anymore. And then now we can take this and export it out. And then we don't need to worry about textures or units, armatures. We don't want to add leaf bone. And make sure we bake the animation down. This is going to be called Scared. I don't even know where we're at now. Scared 7. But I have done this like a ton of times yesterday to make sure it works. Or to hopefully that it works. Let's see. So we have my in-class project. We're going to bring this in. So that gets us the Blender workflow. The Make Human is different because it's like a different scale. It's a tiny character. It had a bunch of things wrong. So let's just do it in Motion Builder so that we have more control. Let's first of all find Bob, animations. It's important to know that this is going to bring in more than one animation and how to deal with that. You just delete the ones that aren't the right one. Is basically it. So scared. Here we go. Choose the skeleton. Bob is skeleton. And I don't think I need to change the units. I'm just going to keep everything default. I can even say reset default. This is the default settings, Bob. And it's going to bring in some junk, right? It's got this one, which is fun. This one, which is even more fun. Where are you? Hitting F, right? That one's good. Who knows what that's about? I think this is all just because I don't know Blender. But ultimately, what we do have is this guy. Successfully retargeted. So other takes go the heck away. Don't need you. I actually have to go to here to find them. Don't need it. And save. So we've now Blender retargeted. You see the process. So let's do Motion Builder really quick. Um, I think if you go back through the 8 years that I've taught, and I've been doing Motion Builder every 8 years, I always apologize when I open up this piece of software. Autodesk won't let it die. It should have been dead a long time ago. It still does everything we need to do. It is what started virtual production. It is real-time software. It's not photorealistic real-time software, but it's real-time software. And when it comes to animation, there's so many people on YouTube who are like, we're going to get rid of Motion Builder this year. And they come up with all these workflows, but it's still the best thing for what it does. Take a look at the anyone who studies UX UI. This is awful. Don't ever have a piece of software that looks like this. It's awful. Everything you need is the bottom left, and everything other things you need are the bottom right. Very hard to find things. But what is nice that Blender doesn't have is that you can drag and drop items in there. I'm gonna get my other character, which is Bobby, from my imports folder, and bring him in. So Bobby happens to be really small, and it was going to cause even more issues, right? This whole question mark thing is because it's supposed to be real-time software, and it doesn't want to let's see, F, there you go. It doesn't want to show the textures because it wants to render real time, and it's in a T-pose. That's all fine. I can scale this, but I actually kind of, when I brought it into Unreal Engine, I scaled it Unreal Engine, so I want to keep with my same scale. Let's just keep it here and not try to adjust things for this software as long as it looks good in Unreal. So what I need to do is tell Motion Builder, its system is called Human IK, HIK, Human IK. I need to tell it that it's a character, right? It doesn't know it's a thing. It just knows it's bones. So I'm going to say this is a character and it's a humanoid character. My scene, they're all the way down here called scene, and then you'll see there's a thing called Mixamo. That's a namespace. It's called Mixamo hips. This is the way you can have five characters in a scene, and they can all have different namespaces. Bob hips, Bobby hips, Frank hips, whatever member of the Rat Pack you want to talk about. And I need to tell these hips that they are the root of a character. On the right side, you'll see we have asset browsers. There are some pre-made character definitions. I'm going to select on characters, and then there's a character named character into the characters folder. It's going to get more absurd than that, okay? So I'm going to drag the character to the hips. It says, do you want to characterize the character named character with the character? Yes, character. Is it a biped or quadruped? We can't do quadrupeds with motive, so we're saying it's a biped. And now on this bottom left thing that you can barely see is a section of characters, and there's a character named character in my character section. To not say the word character again, I'm going to rename this avatar. Whew. All right, so we have a character named Avatar. I need my data. What I've done now is shown you that the motion builder, or I want to show you is that Blender is very limited. That needs that BVH BioVision file format. Motion builder is way more tolerant of any kind of motion data file format, and I'm just going to do an FBX, which is what you normally would do, right? So I have another scene. Not trying to pick on anyone, but I just found the first thing that was open. So with your permission. Without your permission, I'm going to use it anyway. Just drag it in. It says I want to merge it. I don't want to create a new scene. I'm going to merge it in and use the take called 10, right? The 10th take that you had, right? So now we have a character that's actually the normal size. And there's the data, all right? The first thing I want to do is make sure this is in a T-pose. All motion capture data by default Motion Builder, if you zero out everything, it'll be in a T-pose, a perfect T-pose. So I can go to my scene, find the root, and select the hips. So I only have the hip bone selected. You can kind of see here that it's green, right? And if they have meshes on it, maybe you want to say view and say display X-ray. So now like if I go down here, you can see the bones underneath under X-ray mode. Um, so I need to characterize these hips, but first I want to make it a T-pose. I'm going to select all branches, and I see everything selected, all green. Right click and say zero out rotation. Perfect T-pose. All right. No need to keyframe it. I have a T-pose. It's going to go to a T-pose. Very easy. I just need to characterize it. So drag the character to the hips. Characterize. It's a biped. Ready to go. So if I go down to my character section, I have one called avatar, and I have the most recent one called character. Let me rename it and call it data or mocap or whatever. So I'm going to take that character avatar and say double click. How do I want to characterize the settings? The input is going to be a character named data, and then I'm going to say active. Did a little jump, and you see they're doing the same thing. All right. So that's simple enough. But what you have underneath here is an entire like software that says how do you retarget? What are we doing? What are we trying to match? What are we not trying to match? Like for instance, I could say one of the biggest ones is so if I so this animation, it's scaled, right? The bigger animation goes in a bigger space, and the smaller animation goes in a smaller space, right? They're all scaled to themselves. But let's say I have it's not as it's not a power of 10 like this. Let's say you have just a bigger person that's driving a smaller avatar. You don't want, if you're doing like a theater piece and they have to hit actual marks and reach actual objects, you want them to actually hit the same spikes in the floor, right? So then maybe I'd say in my retargeting, I need it to actually match the source, right? And then that makes the foot always hit each other in the same exact place. But what you have here is a poor, tiny thing that's going to stretch itself to match that. So this is a little extreme example, right? But you can see that that way you could take if somebody's like 2 inches shorter than the other person or the avatar, you can make them their feet actually hit the right spots. Tons of features. This is how we're going to be doing live mocap, so it's worth knowing this workflow. Again, Motion Builder is only Windows for right now, but it does work in Boot Camp if you load Windows or if you do VMware and load a virtual machine, you can actually run Motion Builder and it's free for educational stuff. So it's actively being driven, but it's not actually on my character yet. I need to do what's called plot character. I'm not going to plot it like this. I will plot it without matching source. So say plot character, and then I'm going to plot it to the skeleton. Default settings is perfect. And now my character is done. If I go back over to here, again, I need to select all branches and delete the data. So yes, delete the character and delete everything. There's the motion. Doesn't need the other character. Also, what's cool is down here underneath list of things, I have the take. I can rename the take so that the name of the take will be um, whatever, scared. Or this one was just take 10. Cool. And then I can export, which I will. So I'll say file, motion file export, and call this, put it on my desktop or something and call this. Okay, here we go. And then the take is called take 10. The FBX file inside of it will be called this. So the FBX is here. It contains a take called take 10, right? And then when I give deliverables when I do a mocap shoot, I have all 500 takes in one FBX, and each one is a different animation track inside of there. You just give them one FBX file. All right, so I've exported that. Now, what are some of the other cool features of Motion Builder? And you can do some of this stuff in Unreal as well now, which is newer feature, is I can go back to that character, double click on it, character, name character, avatar, double click on it. I can actually say, uh, plot the character to a control rig and call it, I like FK and IK, and say plot the control rig. And now all my animation's been added to an actual rig that I can start animating with, right? And then like Photoshop, you have different layers, right? So it says too many keys for edit. I have a keyframe per frame for motion capture data, but what I could do is say right here, maybe I want to dip down, right? He wants to do like a little hip lift or whatever. I could put a keyframe on just the hips and say by here I want it to be done. And then the middle, I can make him bend down, right? And this is like an IK chain, right? It automatically knows inverse kinematics of how to bend the bones, the knees, all that kind of stuff. And then I can add a keyframe for there. And now we're doing additive animations, right? So this is how you do things like if your character has a giant hat, big nose, the hand goes through the hat, you can add a keyframe and it go around the nose, around the hat. This is how you adjust its grab. So what's cool about Motion Builder and Unreal is that you have a live link, and we'll get into this. This is how we do live animation. Um, you can actually have your character inside of your Unreal scene and do the animation keyframes inside of Motion Builder, and it'll adjust it in Unreal. So you animate in Motion Builder, which has better animation tools, and then it affects and updates automatically the scene inside of Unreal. And this is actually how we'll do live motion capture streaming into the Unreal Engine later on. So I'll put that in week 5 for you as well. Cool. So you can imagine all the different features. This can also send to Maya if you prefer animating in Maya. If Maya is open and you have the same year version, I'm a Motion Builder 2020. If I have Maya 2020, I can say send file to. Oh, you can't. It's grayed out because I don't have Maya open, but it says send to Maya send 3 to Max. So then they're those are live updating between those two pieces of software. And you can continue to animate. And then when I'm done with the whole animation, I say plot the character back to a skeleton, no more control rig, and the animation's built in. Right? And you can keep on going back and forth as many times as you want to. So that's the strength of Motion Builder. There's infinite kind of world of that kind of stuff. So I can save, and I can save all the different information inside this one FBX, but I don't care. I like doing things from scratch all the time. So let's see how this looks. We go back to Bobby animations. And if I look at my animations, I actually made some mistakes when I imported the character, and it was too small. And so I scaled it 10%. So I'm going to keep that consistent, and I'm going to bring in this animation and make sure I set default, make sure I do this one 10%, and make sure I check the Bobby 10%, import, cool, and then everything works, right? And then we can always trim here, right? I want it to start here, and then right there, trim. So it ends right there. And save all. So that's retargeting. Let's try to speed up a little bit and see where we can get today. Everything we don't get to today, we'll try to get to later. But the most important thing is to talk about sequencer. All right. So anything can be animated inside of this level. I'm going to go up here to the top. It says list of sequencers. This little clapper, right? It's called skeuomorphism, where it's showing an old analog way of representing data. Like we don't use clappers on game engine, but we all know what that means. It's like this little icon for save. How many of you guys have actually touched a 5-inch floppy disk? Right. But we know what that means as a save thing. That's called skeuomorphism. Anyway, so add level sequencer. We can make a folder for sequencers, right? So in my assets, make a folder for sequencers. We'll call this one in class for week 5. And then I'm going to do also something. I'm going to save this level, save all, and then I'm going to duplicate my level, save current level as, and I'm going to make it week 05 so that I have different levels for each week so we can always go back and revisit where we were. All right. So with making my level up, my sequencer up here, instead of right-clicking and making a sequencer, I have the sequencer already added into the level. It is by default. Let's see. I call it in class 05. I like to create folders so my sequences are all at the very beginning. So I'm going to right click this, edit the name, and call it 00 sequencers. That way it's always at the very top. I can always find it really quickly. I usually do 00 sequencers, 01 blueprints, 03 OSC, like things that are important to find, group them at the very top. And then if I say open sequencer, I have a timeline here. Right? I have more documentation if you want to really get into all the different buttons and things. Essentially, it's at 30 frames per second. I'm looking at it by frames. So we have 150 frames at 30 frames per second, which means we have 5 seconds represented here. If I want to change some of those settings, I can say where's the start, where's the end. I like to actually keep my playhead inside of my range. I don't want it to go to -0. I don't want to go past my red. If I want it to be a longer take, I can make this sort of the red ending thing says now it's 200, right? So now it's, or 210, and now it's 7 seconds long. Cool. Staying within there. Some people like to look at things as seconds, right? So now it's just ticks marks for seconds and half seconds. That might be a little easier to add keyframes to. And let's go ahead and add our first thing. There's a button for a camera, add a camera. It does two things. It adds the camera and it adds a camera cuts track. If you already have a camera, and you add it to your scene, you're not going to have a camera cuts track. It's just going to be this camera. And then you have to manually add a camera cuts track, which is right here. And then you need to make sure the camera cuts adds that camera. Cool. And what this does is it gives you this little icon that you can lock into and it lets you view from that camera. Right now, the camera doesn't do anything. You can see that right now I am piloting this camera. I don't know if you guys have seen piloting, but you can pilot anything in your scene. I can take this wall and say I want to pilot it. I'm now inside the wall, and as I drive around, I'm driving that wall around to where I want to place it, and then say eject. And there's my wall I just placed right there. Right, so you can pilot things that aren't cameras, but piloting a camera makes more sense. Doing this is doing the same thing. I'm now piloting this camera, and if I keyframe, right, you see, if you've done After Effects, you see this are keyframes, right, and I can skip forward and backwards on keyframes. And then in my details panel, I see this little keyframes button here. Every single thing that can be everything can be keyframed. You can change any property anywhere. It's the same way anything can be interactive, anything can change, anything will be inside of um, our sequencer. Right now, if I have my cinema camera, I have, for instance, a focal length. I can see the focal length has already been added by default, but there's other things I can change as well that aren't there, and I can add them in there and change what they are. For right now, let's do something we already have, our transform. I transform a scale, position, and rotation, and let's just change maybe, I'm going to do auto keyframe. So as I move it around, it'll automatically keyframe. So this is auto keyframe. And then I'll go ahead and add a keyframe for my transform, all three. So now if I go to the end, I can maybe find some things. I like that framing there. And it's already keyframed them, right? It's automatically done that. That can get some people's way because they're moving around. They're like, added keyframes I didn't want. So it's up to you. I can either auto keyframe it or turn it off, put the camera where I want. And I'm just WASDing around. And then I can always just automatically keyframe. All right, and then I can skip forward and backwards. All right, and here's the idea of, oh, the beginning frame is the way I wanted it, the end frame is the way I wanted it, but maybe the middle frame didn't have it aligned right, so I reframed it. I have these little key frames that are key to the storytelling that I'm doing, right? So that gets you up and running with a single camera. That's all we need today is a single camera. I like to find the key frames, right? If you're going to be doing a long sequence, think about the timing and where you want those key frames, and then you come back and do the smaller key frames to adjust, right? Those are in-betweens, called tweens or in-betweens. If things are kind of right, but they're moving in the wrong speed, I can highlight a track, let's say location, keyframe, and then this button right here says curve editor. And if anyone's used to animating, you can see that you have um, your X, your Y, and your Z, and you can change how they're animated in. Right? These are called a Bezier spline. Sometimes you want it to be linear. Right? These are the kind of the basics of animation. And I'm not going to get too far into that. That's kind of there's tutorials on how to do that, but it's all about how you ease things in and move around. You can adjust those. Sometimes I give this its own window. Cool. So that's all there. And then as your scene gets kind of busy, you can actually add folders. So you can say like, here's all the spheres that I'm animating. And then that way you keep organized of, I'm going to add in, I don't have auto keyframe on, so I'm fine. But to not screw myself up, I'm going to eject. Yeah, see, I didn't auto keyframe it, so it's fine. And then maybe I want to add a sphere in here. Just drag it in. And I want it to be inside my folder of spheres, right, so I can find things. Cool. So anything can be keyframed inside the sphere. I want to look at the actual static mesh. And on the static mesh, we have an element 0, which is that material called brick. So we want to look at element 0. And on Element 0, we have a parameter for whatever. Any of these things can be animated. Do I have show me monkeys? Do I not have my monkeys in here? Suzanne's static meshes. There's Suzanne. So I can have a couple of Suzannes and then add them to my sequencer. Oops. Let's just do it this way. And so the same way I have a Suzanne who has a static mesh component. And on the static mesh component, I have three different properties, right? Maybe I want to animate those pupils to glow again. So we can say that is element 2. All right, and on element 2, we have both color and we have glow. And put an initial keyframe there. Um, so say for right now, my color is here. Let's change it over a course of time, add another keyframe. And on that keyframe, I want it to be, let's see if I can do this. RGB. So I'm changing the colors right here, and you can see how it changes those settings here. Properties. Right? So animating the color, and then also animating the glow. All right, so starting here, going here. Right? So anything's keyframeable, even these parameters in your materials. Okay. You might have seen when I selected on my cameras, I now have a different kind of view. This is you can change to a cinematic viewport, and it gives you certain options like, oh, my rule of threes, right? So I can adjust things so that I have my grid. Let's see. All right, go. And then I can help me animate things. And then just remember to eject out when you're inside of parenting because you don't want to change that. I'm going to turn this off for here, but when I go in here, maybe I do want it to be on, right? Um, okay, so let's go ahead and bring in a character. We have uh, old Bobby. I'm gonna bring Bobby in, right? He's called Crouch Sneak Left because that's what the animation was called. Maybe that's confusing. I can delete it from the track. Let's go ahead and get out of here. And just bring in Bobby by himself or Bob by himself. And then you can either throw it in or you could say uh, add actor and select. Or if I have Bob selected here and say add actor, it'll be at the very top. Add Bob. And so Bob is here. I might want to add folders for my skeletal meshes. And one of the default tracks is animation. So now I can add in firing rifle. So he's doing nothing, firing a rifle. And then later on, he can maybe be reloading. Reloading looks like this. Let's get in there closer. There. So what if I want him to fire into a reloading? Well, if you watch as you crunch them together, it shows a crossfade. And now it's crossfaded the two animations. This is something that's fairly new to Unreal. This is what you used to use motion build all the time is how do you blend animations together. All right. So we can continue adding different tracks of animations. And I'm using a lot of keyboard shortcuts. It's why my OBS is recording all the key presses, so you can be quicker. There's a list of all the keyboard shortcuts to help you out with all this stuff. It's kind of second nature at this point for me. So one thing we could do is like a rifle jump. What does that look like? All right, so again, blend that in. Boom. So keyframe, boom, boom, and then he jumps. All right, so we're blending animations. I'll show you how to go a little further with that because you're going to want to blend mocap data, and you're not always on 0, 0, 0. Let's say we bring in the most recent animation for what was it called? Scared 7. Oh, okay, that works. So Scared 7, with it selected, I wonder if it's context sensitive. Let's No, I'll just look for Scared 7. I think they're probably the same. Oh yeah, because I added in when I was testing. So I don't want to have the T-pose, so I'm just trimming it here. Right? I can find where I want to start. Maybe I want to start. Maybe I want to allow it to go out of the playhead area. Find the track. Find where I want to jump. Right there. I love that. You can either drag it in, or you can just say right-click, trim, and edit. And if I blend it in, though, you're going to see that it travels. And that's because the animation didn't happen on 0, 0, 0. So, more evident here. Jump, land, and then he starts flying over. So they have a newer thing where if you right click right here in the center and say, I want to match this with the previous clip with, I usually choose one of the bones, left foot or right foot. If I say like left foot, now he lands and he does scared. Right? It's now gotten rid of the origin and reoriented it around the foot. I think I actually should have chosen the other foot. Play around with that. It's a newer feature. This is pretty much eliminating motion blur. This is what motion blur did, and you can do it now in the timeline and blend all these things together. Super cool, really powerful, a lot of fun, and you can see how they did it with the Meerkat. If you really want to go deep into animation, cool. Um, Running out of time. Let's do interactivity at another time and get into some more camera movement techniques. So we talked about dollies and jibs and all that kind of stuff. If you go to your cinematics, maybe you might notice that there's a thing called a crane. I hit G for game object, and there's our crane. Literally have a crane in here, right? To add a camera to this one, let's just search for Cine Camera. And then I want to parent it to the crane. So that was the wrong one. There we go. There's the crane. All right, so camera crane. Let me make it so you can actually see the word. Crane, parent it to it, and then zero out everything. And then it's parented perfectly to it. I can see through the camera here. I'm going to pin it. So no matter what I'm selecting, I see it. And then if I go to my crane, I can change the crane pitch and the yaw. All right, so I literally have a little camera crane. Might not seem as useful, except for if you go to your camera setting or Cine Camera, you can actually say look at settings. I want to enable look at tracking. What do I want to track? I want to track Homeboy. Eyes are up here. Oops, I went too far. Let's reset that and say, there we go. Always look at the head. And then as I move it around, And again, all these things can be animated, add it to the animation, add it to sequencer, right? I could change what it's looking at. I could change how much it's interpreting, if it's being tracked at all. All those things are changing. And then if I select on it, I should find it over here. Oh, I need to add it in. Let's add it in and add it in. And again, this might be where folders help you out. It's already in there. So crane. So if I take my crane, which by default has no tracks, I can add in a pitch control, yaw control, or go over here to the crane itself and say keyframe, keyframe. They're in there. And then if I come over here and animate a little bit, my pitch, see how it follows the character? Because I have it at that look at behavior. Cool, right? Lock in, and he jumps. But wait, there's more. If I go back to cinematics and I want to bring in the rig rail, I now have a dolly track. Oops, where'd you go? A dolly track. And this dolly track has these little splines. So if I hold down Alt, it makes new splines, and I can start bending things around, making them longer. This is a little hard to do for a really, really long take. I prefer just to freehand animate transforms for long takes, but this is here, and I think it's funny that it's here, so I want to show it. But yeah, the problem with this is that all the control you have is from 0 to 1. And so if you make a mistake in the middle, it's kind of hard to edit. So it's there. I don't use it that much. Maybe you use it for a little bit. You can actually animate whether it's attached or not. So you can attach something to a rail, do it for a little while, then detach it and move off of it. But yes, you can take a crane and attach it to a rail, take the crane, zero it out, and then as you go from, let's go back to rail, say from 0 to 1, to 1, yeah, you've just now got craziness. So, boom. That camera actor 3. I think I broke the system. That's rig rail. Don't need you in there anymore. Camera rig, camera crane, boom, boom. Rail. It's going there. I think I just made the thing do impossible things, which is fine. Again, I'm not working in I'm only working in 7 seconds, and so make sure you have your speed down first for the scene before you start getting into a lot of detail. You can scale all values, but it's kind of hard to do. Cool. Um, in a few more minutes, what are some other things? Materials, lights, um, match source. That's pretty good. So, some other things you might want to do as you're doing a long take is make things disappear and reappear. So, some other things to think about is we go back to our Suzanne. Other tracks, just kind of explore. One of them is actor hidden in game. So maybe something is supposed to be um, visible at the very beginning or invisible, and I want to watch it show up, right? So you can make things disappear after a while and show up and go away, right? So if your camera's seeing something it shouldn't see, instead of having an actor or an extra runaway or hide camera tracks, you can actually hide things from the camera later on. But ultimately, you need to make sure that all your different cameras are using different um, cuts. So this is that first animation I made, and maybe we want to go down here to the craziness I did with the here. I'm going to forward to the keyframe, and I want this actual at this moment to switch to camera actor 3. Boom, it switched to a different thing, and then go to the end of the dolly track, and then we want to maybe switch back to camera actor 0. Right, not the best cut, but you see how you can add different cuts. So the idea is to do a continuous take, but what if you want to fake it? That's fine. The explosion happens and we think it's continuous. Then you can actually switch between different cameras if you want to. Cool. The other thing is, so by default, if I hit play, nothing happens. That's because my sequencer isn't playing. By default, it's not playing. Make sure that you say autoplay and whether or not you want to loop. It can loop indefinitely, it can loop just once. But by saying autoplay, I now have an animation. And then if you don't know, F11 is let's see, let's hit stop. Immersive mode is F11. Alt P is autoplay, and you can screen record here. You can also render out to render queue. That'll be when we do the assignment for rendering. We'll show you how to render out asynchronously, where you can do high resolution renders from a real time rendering engine. All right. So I didn't say loop. It just plays once and then it stops and it goes back to a default thing. All right. So, back to F11. Sorry, F11. Camera on. That's apparently not it. Shift, boop, bam. Or just hit immersive mode, and it comes back out of there. Maybe take it out of the default viewport and then say play immersive mode. Alt P is play, and there you go. Now it's a better full screen. You see this little? Do you guys see the little gray sphere? All right, so let me go back out of immersive. This always happens. So wherever you hit play from, if I hit play, I'm going to eject. You see, there's a sphere. That's going to show up and it's going to piss you off later on. That's where my pawn was when I hit start. Um, that's the camera. If I was in WASD mode, that would be moving that guy around. One thing to do is, well, you can always just hit play when you're underground. It will go away. Sometimes it can be fixed by actually doing a player start. There's no player start in this level. And then just put the player start somewhere else. Let's see if that works. So we're going to hit play, eject, nothing, right? Wait, nope, nothing. Another thing you can do is you can do it with blueprints. We haven't done a blueprint yet, but a level blueprint. You could say on event begin play, actor hidden in game. Let's just search for the word hidden. Uh, Context sensitive goes away. Set hidden in game. Or what's a better one? Set actor hidden in game. And then from here we can say get player pawn. So you could do it with blueprints too, and say yes, hidden. So if I was going to bring back up my player start and disconnect it and hit play, we can see if I hit eject, there it is, right? And then if I reconnect week 5, it's no longer there. Yeah, so 2 ways of getting rid of the weird annoying sphere that shows up in there. That's it, right? So just continue moving forward. We're not really working towards something. We're just trying to explore as much as possible to flex our muscles in the engine and try to practice now so that we are being smart with